Yay! My second election to cover on this critically acclaimed YouTube channel. This one I'm going to call the race to become Ontario's newest Big Daddy. You may have heard of this guy that you should be afraid of, or this guy who you should be afraid of. Although he's not actually running this time, so you don't know what you're talking about. Before I begin, vandalize statues for justice. JK, don't do that. Let's do a quick background about how we got here, just to pad the runtime. 1215, King John signs Magna Carta. 1848, the Earl of Elgin grants representative government to Canada. 1943, George Drew leads the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario to victory in Ontario, beginning 42-year dynasty of careful governing, but nobody cares about that. 1985, the Tories lose power and 33 years of ruining the province of Ontario begins. 2018, Doug Ford leads the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario to victory and becomes Big Daddy and promises to solve all our problems. Okay, now you're up to speed. It has been 4 years since our last election, and Big Daddy wants another 4 years to solve all the problems he wasn't able to solve over the last 4 years. Just kinda all of them. So here we are. Out of our 4 main characters, let's begin with our Big Daddy. In 2018, he and his crack team, no, not that kind of crack, that was his late brother, God rest his soul, they sat down and had the biggest think of the millennia, and that was buck a beer. Get it? Beer would now only be a buck. It's kind of like they were pitching this to people with room temperature IQs. But anyways, most of us thought that would mean we could afford to get loaded on weekdays as well as weekends now. For those of us who weren't alcoholics, it just meant that you had more money to spend on weed. But in the end, only no-name beer was sold for $1, and quite frankly, I make better toilet beer every morning for free, so come check it out. If you ask ahead of time, I can make it asparagus floor. Instead, what Buck a Beer actually was bringing the price floor of a can of beer from $1.25 to $1, reversing the price floor increase of the previous Liberal government over the past 10 years. But that's complicated economics, and in the end, the whole thing honestly didn't really matter, and we all kind of forgot about it soon after that. The other main reason he won was because of the price of hydro. That's what we call electricity in a province that makes the majority of it through nuclear power. I'm starting to think we aren't that smart. The previous Liberals, led first by Big Daddy McGuinty and then by Big Mommy Win? That doesn't sound... Anyways, by Big Mommy Win. Well, anyways, they let the price of hydro more than double over a decade while in power. Which rather pissed people off, as they were running out of kidneys to sell to keep the lights on. I mean, wait, does the liver regenerate? Hold on a second. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Sorry. Anyways, it also didn't help that they were selling electricity to Americans at subsidized rates because Big Daddy McGuinty signed deals with private companies to supply electricity at a certain rate, and then had to keep paying that rate even when the electricity wasn't being used, because the electric car revolution that was supposed to happen in the 2010s hasn't happened yet. But I'm sure it'll happen in the 2020s for sure. So, when our protagonist Doug Ford came in and promised to cut hydro rates if we made him Big Daddy, that was more or less enough for most people. Now, 4 years later, he wants another 4 years because he raised hydro rates less than his predecessors. And sure, some of that is by taking on debt, but I mean, in these post-COVID times, what is debt? Like what does that actually mean? Can't we just print some of this in the basement and pay it off without any negative consequences? Wait, why did I write negative consequences? Is there such thing as a positive consequence? Like when your mother tells you to clean your room or there'll be consequences, does that mean you're getting a new PlayStation if you don't clean? Note to self, say the word scene transition here, but only what's in the quotation marks. Finally, Big Daddy Ford thinks he deserves to stay in power at least until the next recession because of his heroics in handling COVID. Because up to that point, I'm not gonna lie, his first year was a bit of a circus. But all that changed when the illness, TM, flew into town. Despite being fierce enemies over his insistence that private petroleum companies propagate his political propaganda for political purposes, he set aside his differences with the people who campaigned against him, despite not being on the same level of government, and declared that he will lock down as hard as necessary for as long as necessary. So if you lived outside Toronto and the Peel region, you were looking at an on and off again schedule of lockdowns every few months. And for those of you in Peel and Toronto, sucks to suck. You guys are sick, get back in your houses and let us Lysol spray you. Naturally, as time went on, people started getting restless, and our Big Daddy was forced to relax the restrictions to appease his supporters who were losing their minds, being cooped up inside, and buying bouncy castles online. Immediately, his opponents pounced with edgy memes and demanding a return to lockdowns, lest the blood be on his hands. On the other hand, his fanbase was livid that their true north and free province was turning into communist Finland or something with all these lockdowns. And then there was the rest of us who just wanted going outside to be made less of a crime than stealing again. Incidentally, the NDP is currently running ads critical of Big Daddy Ford by evoking sympathy for the small businesses sidelined by the Premier during the lockdowns. Even though they wanted even harder and longer lockdowns that would have ended the small retailer entirely. So I'm sorry, but this ad gets an F for fake news from me. Where's the internet censorship when you need it? Okay, at the very least it's an R for revisionist. So who are these revisionists? Well, that brings us to who I thought was going to be the next main challenger to Big Daddy Ford, Andrea Horwath of the NDP. She's like our AOC, basically. And for those of you over at the UK, like think of like a female version of Jeremy Corbyn. Listen, I don't pay attention to your politics that much. I just know that there's like this guy Johnson. He had a few too many to drink. Anyways, the NDP has a long and proud tradition of finishing third in Ontario, and represents the unions who run most of their ads for them. It looks like an NDP ad, but it isn't. Oof. Last election, they got a little spooked when they finished second, and it looked like they actually had a chance at winning the whole thing next time. But it looks like that won't be a problem though. Basically, the NDP is just a party full of hipsters who think the only way to get Queen's Park to actually do what the people want is by ending the seesaw that sees the Liberals ruin the province for a couple terms, and then the Conservatives ruin the province for a couple terms, and then back to the Liberals, and back and forth, here we go. I mean, sure, the NDP did run the province in the early 90s when they promptly ran it into the ground, but come on. Despite finishing second in 2018 after the Liberals cratered, the NDP seems to once again be bound for third place, which has to make you feel just a little bit for them. I mean, they literally got the beating of a lifetime. They just released a mammoth platform and they did their research, and for sure this time they have everything they need to put the team together with meaningful impact. But alas, no, because of this one tiny boo-boo in the 90s, the NDP is still toxic. Like OJ. So who is the main man vying to replace Ford as our new Big Daddy? This guy, Stephen Del Duca, whom the NDP are desperately trying to convince us isn't the solution because he was part of the previous government that ruined the province before Ford had a chance to ruin it. But I mean, look at him. How could this man be dangerous? He looks like the safe friend you go to when you need to get a stranger to stop hitting at you at a party, but for some reason won't respect you, declining him because he's a sexist pig. No, not Del Duca, he's not the sexist pig, he's the safe one. Back in his university days, I'm sure he would recite Gloria Steinem on his dates and ask for consent 2 times before holding hands. Definitely, we cannot go wrong with him. With bold ideas like buck a ride. I see what you did there. Wait, how much is this going to cost us? Never mind, silly question. Also, bringing back grade 13 for students who want to spend another year in school for some reason. Even though the victory lap is already a thing. And even if you don't forgive him for helping make Ontario so unaffordable, who else are you going to vote for if you don't like the current Big Daddy? The NDP? Fuck you, you won't, and he knows it. So why don't you do yourself a favor and flip a coin this election? Heads or tails, the seesaw of our two-party system. Although it really does feel like sometimes both sides are tails. Or at least the part below the tail. And then there's the Green Party. Technically, there are 4 political parties that are probably going to win seats this election. But I mean, come on. Look, come on. Unless you live in Guelph, you're not going to elect a Green MPP anyways. So, yeah, we're not really missing much here.